Hi guys, you're welcome back to my YouTube channel, and if this is your first time coming across my channel, my name is Nancy. In today's tutorial, I'll be showing you how to draft a basic sleeve. So I'll be sharing both the short sleeve pattern and the long sleeve pattern, and if this is something you'd like to learn, keep watching and hit on the subscribe button if you haven't subscribed yet. So let's get started. So I'll start by drafting out the short sleeve pattern. So this is my pattern paper here, and I folded it into two. You can decide to draft directly on the main fabric and fold your fabric into two as well. But for this purpose, I'll be drafting on the pattern paper. The first step is to rule the starting line, and the next line would be called the cap sleeve line. To get the cap sleeve line, you divide your bust circumference into 12. My bust circumference divided by 12 is 2.9 inches. So whatever you get for your own measurement, you should add extra 1.5 inches as I have done here. So now it's 4.4 inches altogether. I will go ahead to rule a straight line across this point I chalked. So this is the cap sleeve line. The next line is the full length of the sleeve. Since it's a short sleeve, I marked 9 inches as the length of my sleeve. Now I'll go ahead to rule a straight line across this point. The next step is to divide your round armhole circumference by 2. So my round armhole circumference divided by 2 is 7.5 inches. Now I'll place the tape directly on the cap sleeve line to mark 7.5 inches. Now I went ahead to use my ruler to connect this point to the top of the starting line, and this will form a slant line. Now I'll go ahead to place my measuring tape directly on the slant line to divide the slant line into two in order to mark its midpoint. So basically, when drafting a sleeve, there are different methods depending on the kind of sleeve you want to achieve. But since this is a very basic sleeve, the front armhole of the sleeve will be deeper than the back armhole of the sleeve. To achieve this, I placed my tape half inch above the midpoint to mark. Now I'll go ahead to connect both midpoints together. Now I would connect the top of the midpoint to the end of the slant line using the straight side of my ruler. And the next step is to use the curved side of my ruler to connect the midpoint to the top of the slant line. So this is the armhole for the back piece of the sleeve. Now to get the armhole for the front piece of the sleeve, I would use the curved side of my ruler to connect the top of the slant line to the lower midpoint. And then I would also connect the lower midpoint to the end of the slant line, but this time around I would flip the curved side of my ruler inward to connect the lower midpoint to the end of the slant line. So obviously we have two thick lines, and the inner line is the armhole for the front piece of the sleeve. The next step is to mark the round sleeve measurement directly on the sleeve length. So when my sleeve length is on 9 inches, I marked my round sleeve on my arm to be 12 inches. I divided that 12 inches by 2 and I had 6 inches. Now I connected the round sleeve point to the end of the round armhole. So I went ahead to thicken the sleeve length line. So this is the sleeve pattern without any sewing allowance included. So people that are fond of using pattern drafting, they usually just cut out the template and then keep it, and whenever they want to add allowances to it, they place it on the main fabric, then add allowance to the main fabric. But in this case, I would like to add my allowances now so you understand it. So on the round armhole, I added extra 1 inch to the side, and on the round sleeve I added 1 inch to the side as well. Now I'll connect these 2 points together with my straight ruler. All right, so this is me trying to blend the lines together, and this is the short sleeve pattern. So take note that this sewing allowance that was included is just for the side of the sleeve, But when you want to add your sewing allowance to the length of the sleeve, then you can just place the template directly on the actual fabric to increase the sleeve length. Now I'll be cutting out the round sleeve for the back piece first, and then the sides of the sleeve, as well as the bottom of the sleeve. So for this basic sleeve, I initially said that the front piece of the sleeve armhole will be deeper than the back piece armhole, right? So I'm just going to label this full side of the sleeve as the back piece of my sleeve. And on this other side of the sleeve, which is my front piece, I'll be cutting out the top of the armhole following the direction of the second line. So this has helped us in differentiating the front piece and the back piece of the sleeve. So if I fold it here, you can see that the armhole for the front piece is deeper than the back piece. So this is all for the short sleeve. I hope this was easy to understand. Alright, so I'll go ahead to draft the long sleeve pattern using the same method. So I folded the pattern paper into two and I went ahead to mark the starting line. The next line is the cap sleeve line. To get the cap sleeve line, you divide your bust circumference into 12 and whatever you get, you add extra 1.5 inches to that. So mine was 4.4 inches and then I ruled a straight line across this point. The next line is the elbow line. From the starting of my shoulder to my elbow, the length is 14 inches. So I marked 14 inches and ruled across this line. The next line is the full length of my sleeve. I want the full length of my sleeve to be 23 inches. Now I'll go ahead to rule a straight line across this point. On the cap sleeve line, I would place my arm round hole circumference divided by 2 inches, which is 7.5 inches. And then I would connect this point to the top of the straight line. And this would form a slant line. Now on the slant line, I would place my measuring tape directly on it and folded it into two to mark the midpoint of this slant line. After that, I would place my tape above the point I chalked to mark ½ inch. And then I would connect the two midpoints together. The next step is to connect the end of the slant line to the top of the midpoint using a straight ruler. And then I would connect the top of the midpoint to the top of the starting line using the curved side of my ruler. So this would be the armhole for the back piece of the sleeve. Now to get the armhole for the front piece of the sleeve, which is deeper than the back piece of the sleeve, I would mark the top of the starting line to meet the lower midpoint using the curved side of my ruler. Now, using the curved side of my ruler, I would also flip it inward to mark the lower midpoint to meet the end of the slant line, and this second line would be the armhole for the front piece. So since the length of my elbow is 14 inches, I placed my measuring tape to round my elbow and I had 10 inches. So I'm going to divide my round elbow into two, which is 10 inches divided by 2 is 5 inches. Now I would mark 5 inches here. And for the full length, which is on my wrist, I placed my measuring tape around my wrist and the measurement I got was 8 inches. I divided it by 2 and that is 4 inches here. I'm going to mark 4 inches here and then connect the 3 points together using a straight ruler. Alright, so I'll go ahead to add sewing allowance to the side of the sleeve. On the armhole, I would add 1 inch. On the elbow, I would add 1 inch, and on the wrist, I would add 1 inch to connect all 3 points together. And then I'll go ahead to blend. The next step is to cut out the pattern. And the final step is to spread out the pattern so I can easily deepen the front armhole. Alright guys, thanks for watching to the very end, and I hope this tutorial was helpful. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe, share and like my tutorial. And if you don't want to miss any of my tutorials, turn on your notification bell so you can be notified when I upload new tutorials. Thanks for watching to the very end, and see you in my next tutorial. Bye for now.